Before I even start this video, I just want to make a few things clear. I was flown out to Warsaw, Poland by 11-Bit Studios last week to play their two upcoming games, the Alters and Frostpunk 2. They paid for my travels and food while I was there, and I had an incredible time. I got to spend about 2 to 3 hours for each game, and while they did pay for my accommodations, that will no way impact my thoughts. They were very clear that we were in no way obligated to say nice things about these games, which is always very reassuring to me considering I told them I was a really big fan of one of these games and not so much the other. These were just genuine people who wanted to show passionate gamers what they've been cooking. Also, I was not able to capture any of the actual footage I played, so all of this B-roll was provided by 11-Bit Studios. So again, I am super grateful for the opportunity. It was a total blast, and I cannot thank 11-Bit Studios enough. So while the Frostpunk 2 embargo isn't up for a few days, let's talk the Alters. Between both of these games, the Alters was one that immediately grabbed my attention back when I first saw the trailer. I wasn't really sure exactly what the game would be like or how it would play out, but I was intrigued enough by the concept, and the fact that this game is from the same people who did the incredible This War of Mine. Side note, if you have not played that, please do so. In this game, you will play as Jan Dolski, who is a man that has crash landed on a planet, and it seems he is the only survivor of his crew. And after wandering around the planet for some time, he stumbles upon an abandoned base, and now he is taken control of. And after learning that the rising sun could prove to be deadly, he is on a clock to try and escape before it is too late. This is an action-adventure survival game with base-building elements, but the most unique part of this story is what are known as the Alters. Very early on in the playthrough, you learn about this material Rapidium, and that can be used to clone things. And after testing this on a sheep, he is ordered to try one on himself, but this time he can alter an event in his life. What if he didn't stay with his wife? What if he stood up to his dad who was abusing his mom? And all of these versions of Jan Dolski are the same at the core level, but vastly different. The one turned out to be an engineer, and the other a doctor, whose lives were vastly different based on these alterations made. This is absolutely one of the highlights of the game for me, but before I dive too deep into that, let's cover a few things first. Regarding the visuals and performance, there isn't a crazy ton to say other than it looks good. In the time that I played, there were two main places that you can explore, one of which is the outside world where you will go and mine resources to survive, and I mean, seriously, I love the art direction. It is so beautiful. The details are just absolutely insane. There was a specific moment where I found this new material, Rapidium, and I thought my computer was like having problems, but it was actually designed that way, and I loved how unique it felt. You can also explore and customize your base as well, and again, everything looks and runs perfectly. I had zero performance issues during my entire playthrough. The only slight negative I had was on some of the up-close facial models, but again, I'm being super nitpicky. 11-Bit Studios has never been one to have this complete powerhouse of graphical fidelity to show off before, so I was pleasantly surprised at how good this game looked consistently. The story in this game is definitely one of the most intriguing parts, and again, if you've played an 11-Bit Studios game, this shouldn't really come as a surprise. And just to reiterate, you play as Jan Dolski, and you are thrown onto this planet, realizing you have been the only survivor of this wreck. And after learning of this new material Rapidium, you decide to clone yourself and create new versions of you. Now, what is really cool is the way in which this story is actually told, because every alter is actually voiced by the same guy, Alex Jordan. And I met him during my trip, and he was such a genuine guy with a huge passion for video games, and I think it absolutely shows up here. Now, one thing I am curious about, and I have no clue on, is how many different versions of Jan Dolski are in this game. But everyone that I did encounter during my playthrough felt different, and I really enjoyed that. And you also get the added choice of which alter you would like to produce as well. I didn't pick up on this until way later in my playthrough. I was kind of waiting until I was going to create more alters, but it turns out I was supposed to do that on my own terms. And what's really cool is there's also this large timeline of Jan Dolski's life and all the major decisions that he's made. And you can pinpoint exactly where you want this alter to branch from. And then you will get to see how that altered in the course of his life. Some of it is super emotional to read and reflect on as well. And then after cloning yourself, you run into the fun idea of trying to explain to them that they are a copy of you and not the other way around. around. And depending on your dialogue choices, it may not go over too well. You can see if they are getting visibly frustrated, uncomfortable, or just downright angry. And there's a lot of really great setup here, and the only other person you are in communication with is someone on your computer who is trying to help you get out and survive. Now, I did wish I got a little bit more time with these elements because I was just too busy exploring everything else this game had to offer, but I spoke with a few people directly from 11-bit Studios about how I felt this was kind of only the beginning and this had potential to be even deeper, and they did reassure me that this was only the tip of the iceberg, which is very exciting in my opinion. I only had a max of 2 other Yandolskis by the time I had finished, and I was really interested to see how they would all interact with one another because, once again, this is something they kind of claimed would be a really cool and interesting part of the game, and I absolutely see the vision for it, even though I never got to see it fully realized in my time. I also have no idea how many different versions can be active at the same time as well. I'm not sure if there's going to be like a cutoff. I would imagine there could be probably close to 10 different versions. Again, that is a total guess. I have zero evidence, but there could be even more, and that would be nuts. You can see a glimpse of it in a few of the trailers, which leads me to believe there can be a pretty decent amount on screen, and I'm sure they will all have their own various tasks to do. So I'm very excited to see this concept fully realized after the full release. Regarding the gameplay loop, I found it quite enjoyable. Like every game from 11-bit Studios, there isn't any actual combat in this game, at least that I'm aware of, but the big focus is on survival, crafting, and gathering resources. Now, I only get to see a glimpse of this on how it could eventually evolve, but I remember after going to the second area, I was mining for materials, and I started to think, man, this kind of might get tedious over time. Come to find out, I found more rupidium, and I created an altar whose specialty was in mining resources, and he was able to do this faster and more efficiently. That way I could continue to do the things I needed to do to progress the story. Once again, I also have no clue how deep this mechanic goes, but I imagine it's pretty thought out. I have no clue what it could look like running around and ordering 7 or 8 different Yandolskis to do things, but I imagine it'd be very cool. And what is also really dope is there is even some base building elements. After gaining resources, you can craft kitchens, new rooms, etc., and completely rearrange your base. I thought this was a super cool addition that the game didn't have to add at all, but I'm very glad it did. Again, I have to preface, even after playing for around 3 hours, I only managed to ever get to the screen that said Act 1. There was also a prologue previously, and they even stopped some people if they progressed too far. So I imagine there are some pretty cool secrets and things up ahead that they didn't want to show quite yet, and so that way there's some surprises on the full game's release. Because at around the time I finished up, I started to wonder if things would get old or boring after a while, but again, I am just basing this off what I have seen and experienced, and I am really hoping there will be a lot more gameplay mechanics and locations added to keep this story fresh and engaging throughout the entire playthrough. I didn't really see any glaring negatives so far other than the potentials if they don't continuously add new things throughout the playthrough, but it really is hard to make those kind of judgments until we see the full game's release. I think the decision making in games like this War of Mine was absolutely incredible, and they had some serious impact, but it did take a long time to flesh those things out. And this is a genuinely talented studio with an amazing crew of people behind it, so I can only hope that this game will have some of those similar tough and heartfelt decisions to make as the game progresses. We have no official release date yet for the Alters, but it's supposed to be coming out sometime in the late 2024. I am highly anticipating it, and I definitely think this is one to keep on your radar.